Hey, YouTube folks! Welcome to another video on this channel, Insadrisco. After many requests, yes, I'm starting a playlist here. Learning the French defense. As you know, I'm a French defense player. I play the French against White's e4. It's been quite a few years now. The idea is this playlist can't fit into one video. We're going to have to split it into several videos. That's why I'm going to create a playlist, a collection about the French defense. And the idea is for us to understand the concepts that guide a player in the opening, okay? Not just memorizing the moves, but the concepts themselves. And with these concepts, make our decision-making easier, all right? That's going to be the general idea of this playlist. We're going to end up covering a lot of French defense variations here, but you'll also get a pretty complete understanding of this opening, all right? That's the general idea. So this is going to be the first video in this playlist, and the next ones will come in sequence. So without further ado, let's get straight to today's video now. Here we are. Our opponent has white, and we'll play the French defense as black. But Raphael, how do you play the French? Well, the French defense is characterized by the move e4 from white, then e6, d4, and d5, reaching this pawn structure here. And that's basically it. There are four main variations that our opponent can end up choosing. And what are they? Well, the first is the advanced variation, where white closes the center with pawns. You can play the knight to c3, known as the classical variation of the French. The third is knight to d2, which is called the Tarrasch variation. The fourth option is the exchange variation, with white capturing the d5 pawn. We'll review each variation step by step, okay? In some cases, there will be more videos within one variation than in others because there are more sub-variations, right? So we're going to look at each one a little more in depth, okay? It won't be superficial. We'll take an in-depth look at each one. Today, we're going to start the playlist about the French advanced variation, okay? So we're going to try to exhaust the possibilities, the main continuations, right? For this variation, then we'll move on to the classical, then to the Tarrasch, and also to the exchange, okay? In the next videos, we'll see how the advanced variation works. When our opponent plays the advanced variation, he closes the center. And here we already have four concepts that whenever my opponent plays the advanced variation, I already remember these concepts that will guide my opening moves, right? So what are they? Concept number one, well, our opponent. When the center is closed, white is more mobile. White's pieces develop easily. Knight to f3 bishop, to d3 all active with plenty of space. So that's a characteristic we should take into consideration in the advanced variation, right? French defense players must always remember the c8 bishop known as the bad bishop in the French. But why, Raphael? Why is it the bad bishop? Because the c8 bishop gets blocked. Within the pawn structure, notice that our central pawns end up limiting the development of this piece. And this ends up being a strategic problem that will also guide our decision-making in some cases in the middle game. Why? Because whenever we have the option to trade, our bishop on c8, though, restricted by white's active bishop on f1, is actually a good bishop. We should make this trade, okay? It's the dream of every French defense player to trade the bishop on c8 for the bishop on f1. It's a real dream. Of course, this knowledge will guide us. To make the right middle game decision, we know we'll trade when given the option. The third concept, also very important. Well, the typical breakthroughs. The first common French breakthrough is c5. It's very important for us to know the breakthroughs in defenses and openings, okay? c5 is a crucial breakthrough. Let's remember it, okay? And the fourth concept in the advanced variation is the second typical breakthrough in the French, which is f6. So basically, c5 and f6 are very important breakthroughs that the French player needs to know and needs to apply, okay? So in some cases, people sometimes say, Raphael, but I don't play the French because I get totally locked up. I can't get my pieces out to play, and I spend the whole game limited. Well, this happens many times because the player doesn't know the typical break moves. So if you know how to play c5 and f6 at the right moments, you can free your pieces. And that's the big secret, right? Of the French, which I'm going to reveal to you right now. All right, guys, so these four concepts are very, very important, okay? When you're playing the advanced variation, first, white has more mobility, has more space on the king side. The bishop on c8 is always a bad bishop, and the c5 and f6 breaks are extremely important for anyone who plays the French. Knowing this, we'll look at the advanced variation in this first video. And the next move that black plays here is already the typical break number 1. Which one is it? C5, C5. Is this the move that black is going to play? Because the general idea is that we can break this super pawn center that white is building, right? So usually black starts by trying to break the d4 pawn, and right after that, if they manage to break the d4 pawn, black also wants to break the e5 pawn. That's the sequence. We keep breaking down the fortress by targeting the d4 pawn, then the e5 pawn. That's what we have to do. So that's why, already on the third move, we play the first typical break, c5, aiming to take the d4 pawn. Of course, most of the time, the vast majority of our opponents will play with c3 in this position. Wanting to, right? Keep the structure closed, because if we take here, oops, they recapture with the pawn, and the center still stays closed, okay? That's the general idea for white. So this one is by far the most played move. But we're not going to look at this move today, okay? We'll cover this move in the next video of the playlist. Today, we're trying different moves. What happens if I play c5 and my opponent gives up the center by taking the c5 pawn? So before we get into the super technical part, I want to show this sub-variation here, which can also happen in your games. If your opponent takes the c5 pawn, because white gave up that super center and took the little pawn here, how are we going to keep playing? We'll play bishop takes c5 and observe. I'll put it that way. I picked this sequence to make it easier to understand, okay? What? With some simple and natural moves, ours from black here, from our opponent, we already reach a very interesting position, solving the main problems of the French, okay? After bishop takes c5, you could play knight to f3. The idea for white is to play bishop to d3 and castle, developing the pieces and protecting the king. We're going to play here in this position with knight to c6, already keeping an eye on the e5 pawn. What's the strategic idea? Break white's center? The d4 pawn has already been broken since white themselves captured on c5, and now the idea is to break the e5 pawn. That's what the French defense player has to keep in mind all the time, okay? Bishop, d3 is a possible move for white. What should black play next in this position? Well, pause the video and try to figure out what move that is, Raphael. We already have the knowledge to get this move right using the concepts we're learning. So, what do we have to do here? Break the e5 pawn, right? What are common breaks in the French defense? c5, which we've played, and f6, so f6. Here's the move that black should make, because now we want to break the pawn on e5 and generally control the center. White could take the pawn, then you play knight takes f6 to develop our piece. White can castle, and black can castle as well. And notice that at this point, black has solved almost all the problems they could have with the French defense. Because, of course, white took the pawn on c5 and ended up helping a little, right? Notice here we have our pieces active. We managed to break white's strong pawn center very effectively. Soon after, moves like e5 follow, and the bad bishop is no longer bad. It will come out along this diagonal, actively pinning the knight on f3. The rook is also causing problems now, and basically black is playing, they have a free game here and an advantage in this position, okay? So this is a small example, okay, of how it works when our opponent gives up the center, and how we can quickly solve all the problems with our pieces. The strategic problems, our pieces are active and playing. This bishop won't be bad anymore, since after e5, it's dominating the diagonal aggressively. All right, everyone. This is the first overview of the advanced variation, when our opponent gives up this super center, and in the next video, we'll get into the more technical variations. When our opponent plays c3 in the opening, in this specific position, plays c3 here, that's how they're gonna play. And we're going to understand. We'll go through some of the main variations, and we'll take a closer look at one of them, so that you have a more solid understanding of how to play the French defense. If you like this playlist, don't forget to leave a big like and comment down below. If so, you're interested in the next videos in this playlist, and I'll bring those videos to you. All right, everyone, a big hug. See you in the next videos.